The following's intended solely for the use of those with a sense of adventure.
I'm shaking the dust of this town off my feet, and I'm going to see the world.
This is Travel with Hawkeye. Here's your host, Mark Hawkeye Lewis.
You know, if you're an avid skier like myself, there's been a seismic change in the skiing industry in the last couple of years with the Epic Pass and then following after that, the IKON Pass. And we'll explain what those two are if you're not part of the skiing world. But it's an interesting business debate going on in the skiing community on should you get the Epic Pass, which is a season pass to a number of resorts, and the IKON Pass, which is also a season pass to a number of other resorts. And recently on Bloomberg.com, Kyle Stock had an incredible article called The Battle for the Best Ski Pass, Epic versus IKON. And I invited Kyle to be part of the Travel with Hawkeye podcast. So first of all, Kyle, explain to people what is the Epic and what is the IKON Pass.
Sure, yeah. So the Epic Pass is sold by a company called Vail. Been around for about 10 years, and Vail owns, I think at the moment, about 20 resorts. So basically they kind of changed the model in the ski industry where they started really focusing on the skiing and making money from the mountain, whereas in the past, corporate ownership of these resorts, they'd focus on selling real estate, selling hotel rooms, and kind of using the skiing as a loss leader. But Vail was able to sort of generate some network effects by buying these resorts, packaging them together under a season pass, and kind of having the whole be greater than the sum of the parts. Now, IKON is sold by a new company called Altera, which is basically kind of a super group of resorts that pretty much spun up overnight about a year and a half ago. It was a group of resorts owned by private equity, a second group of resorts owned by private equity, and then they bought a third group of resorts. So overnight, Vail had a substantial competitor, which all worked out great for skiers in terms of the products and the prices on these things.
I kind of do like the business model that's changed a little bit because I always thought it was a little bit unsustainable when these skiing companies were focused so much on real estate. There's only so much real estate they can sell, and I thought, man, where's this going to end? So it's kind of, in one way, I'm kind of glad that they're focusing now on the skiing as their profit center because it seems more of a sustainable business.
Yeah, and that really, I mean, what instigated that was the last recession. The tide went out, and all these private equity companies that own these ski resorts realized the math wasn't going to work on the real estate part of it. But oddly enough, the actual skier visits didn't drop that much through the recession, so it really validated the thesis that, hey, maybe we should, focus on the mountain and focus on the skiing and make that a viable business model.
So here's kind of some of the pros and cons of all this, okay? And I read your article, which, as I said before, I really enjoyed, but some of the pros and cons about all this that I see. As a skier, I have to decide now, basically in April, if I want to get the benefits of this, because that's really what the best deals are. And by the time ski season comes around, you can't buy these passes anymore. You've got to buy them well before ski season. So you've kind of got to plan your next year's ski adventures months in advance, almost a year in advance now, and that's kind of difficult to do. You got to almost take like this year, I couldn't figure out if I wanted the Epic Pass or the IKON Pass, and it's kind of difficult to do that.
And you got to survey all your friends.
Yes.
Make sure, you've got your crew going to the same spot.
Seriously, yeah.
The upside, the sales point for them, part of the sales pitch, is a little bit of a hedge in terms of weather. So if you get one of these passes and there's no snow in California, you'll be able to use it in Colorado or Utah or Wyoming and vice versa, or on the East Coast. So that's kind of part of their pitch and part of their kind of how they risk-proof their business a little bit. It's a bit of a hedge, but it's also a bit of a hedge for the skier.
Yeah.
So that's the positive.
Yeah, because I had decided to get the IKON Pass this year because there are some resorts I hadn't gone to in a long time. And then my wife said, you know what, I'd like to go back to Vail. We haven't been there in a long time. Well, that's on the Epic Pass. And here's the other thing, too. Boy, I kind of have a feeling these deals, they're good deals. You can get an Epic Pass for $6.99, and there's minor restrictions over some of the holidays. And if you visit 4 times, you get your money back. So that's a great deal. And if you visit a lot, especially if you live up in Denver or in Salt Lake City, you come out way ahead. But I feel like, though, that this really kind of screws the person who's going to go on one ski trip a year, didn't plan ahead, because lift tickets, if you don't get this pass, are really expensive now.
Yeah, and that's a dynamic that that's not a mistake. They're really trying to push people to buy these passes because, business-wise, it takes all the volatility out of their business. They get the revenue over the summer in the slowest part of the year, And then if it's a terrible snow year, it doesn't matter so much. They've already sold most of their inventory.
Yeah.
So it really works out well for them. It works out well for a lot of people.
Yes.
But yeah, the onus is on the consumer to really do their homework and figure out what makes sense for them. And then the flip side, one of the big narratives in the industry right now is that it's going to be kind of detrimental in terms of getting people into the sport.
Yes.
So just someone who wants to try it for a day, some cases over $200 now. Mm-hmm. If they don't want to sign up for 4 or 5 days on this pass, then they might not even give it a shot. So there's some worry that these two businesses are kind of squeezing the entry point.
Yeah, see, that's another problem that I have too. And because, I mean, let's say you want to go, I was in Vail a couple weeks ago, and that was over $200, $206, I believe it was, for a one-day pass. And you haven't even rented skis and paid for your lessons yet.
Yeah,
and
you didn't have the Epic Pass, did you?
No, so I had it this year. I was just checking what it was.
Okay.
I bought it for this year, so I came okay. But yeah, I mean, if I was getting into the sport now, and I got or if you're a family and you're trying to get your family into the sport, you just moved to Denver and like, hey, let's try skiing. It can be extremely expensive to get started in the sport, and I wonder, is that sustainable also? Like you said, it's squeezing the people at the entry point.
Yeah, no one really knows, honestly. And the CEOs of both these companies, I interviewed them, and they said, basically, we know people are going to ski more often, whether they're already skiers or not, and we think that's positive. So in the long run, if you get 10 days on the mountain rather than 4 that you might have the year before, you're probably going to tell your friends, you're probably going to take your kid. Over time, it'll sort of add up. But then on the flip side, I talked to a lot of independent resorts that are worried, that aren't under one of these big corporate empires, and they're hustling.
Yeah, that was my next question. These smaller resorts, and that aren't part of it. It's like if I lived in Denver and I bought the Epic Pass, I would never visit a smaller resort, because why would I? I've already paid to ski, and I'm going to get as much use out of that pass as possible. And I'm wondering, how is that going to affect some of the smaller, especially the resorts that great places to take families who are learning how to ski.
Yeah, and there was a real rush, especially when Alterra came on the scene. That kind of forced everyone's hand out. There was a rush to align with one of these or the other, and some resorts got left out in the cold, and they're having to hustle to refine their strategy, do special deals, make sure they're really unique in terms of, the food they serve and kind of the culture of the place and the vibe. And some of them have a little bit of safety and geography, if they're close to a city center where there aren't a lot of ski areas around, they might be a little better off. There's, Bridger Bowl up in Bozeman, Montana, or
Mount Hood.
Mount Hood, exactly. Yeah. So those kinds of places, they're going to have their base of customer on one of these products or not.
Yeah. What's interesting too is some of the resorts that aligned with Alterra. Like, for instance, you mentioned this in your article, Deer Valley, which for years was a very high-end resort. The lift tickets were a little bit more expensive. They constantly groom. They don't allow snowboarders. And they said they really, when they decided to align with Alterra, they saw that their customer base changed a little bit, the demographic.
Yeah, they actually sold to Alterra, so that was an interesting one. I kind of wonder if they would have partnered had they not sold, but now Alterra actually owns that. It's one of the 13 or 14 that they own. But yeah, it changed their demographic overnight. And one of the things I've heard since I did the article is there's huge crowds at these mountains now, both because of the pass and because of the winter it was. It was a great winter for snow pretty much everywhere. The economy was still pretty strong. So it was just a blockbuster year in terms of number of people, but the sort of local faithful are really kind of worked up about this. In places like Deer Valley or Jackson Hole even, they're not used to lift lines this long, and it's kind of a point of friction, let's say.
It's funny that you say that, because I just saw a post from a Montana resort operator that joined the IKON Pass, and I think it was Big Sky. And he just I don't know if I saw that in your article or somewhere else, but he just posted, hey, we're getting a lot of people visiting that never visited before because of the IKON Pass, and people are, there's bumper stickers that are out that say, IKON wait for you to leave, and so forth.
Yep. Right.
And he said, hey, we need these people to sustain our resort, and they're bringing a lot of money to the economy. They're our guests. We've always invited guests. But it's kind of funny that some of the locals are saying, hey, this sucks for us.
Yeah, I saw that post as well. And it's a tricky thing. I mean, but the flip side of that is these companies are thriving. They're hiring. They're paying better than they ever have before. You can go to one of these ski towns and actually make a decent living now. So there's always going to be that friction there, and it'll be interesting to see where the equilibrium is, but there's definitely a very intense narrative going on after the winter we just had.
Yeah, it is. It is very, very interesting. It kind of has really changed the business, and I think there's a lot of positive things about it too. I mean, everything in life has positive and negatives, and that's why I liked your article, because it really kind of talked about the whole situation. One question I have is, say you're a resort and you aligned with like Alterra, okay? Before you sold your own season passes, and you made all that money off your season passes. How does it work when you align with like the IKON pass? How does it work for how much percentage do you get of that? Is it per skier visit, or how does that all work?
Yeah, financially, there's some variations, and some resorts negotiated their own separate deal, but most of them, all the revenue from the passes goes in a pool, and then there's a tally on the number of skier days, which is basically every time someone goes to the mountain with a pass and swipes it, that's a skier day. And then that is split evenly among where the pass holders went. So if you had 100 IKON season pass holders at your mountain that winter, then you'd get paid a 100 visit rate based on how many total visits there were. So it sort of nets out. It's definitely going to benefit the resorts that draw more traffic. But most of these resorts are still selling their own individual season passes, so it doesn't make sense if you don't live near the mountain. But if that's the only place you're going to ski, that makes sense for a certain slim demographic of people.
Now, we addressed this not too long ago. My wife and I went to Austria, and it was cheaper for us to go to Austria for a week than it would have been to go to Colorado for a week if we did not have Epic passes.
Right.
And let's see if you can if you can guess this. St. Anton, which is one of the most glamorous spots in all of Europe to go skiing, what a daily lift ticket costs at St. Anton?
Oh, I don't know. In the euro?
Yeah.
Is it 105 maybe? I don't know.
50.
50. Oh, wow. Yeah, see, Europe is really the Wild West. It's the biggest ski market in the world, but it has some crazy ownership structure. So a lot of these mountains over there are owned by municipal governments.
Yes, yeah.
Some are corporate, some are owned by individuals, and then there's a mix of ownership in each resort sometimes. So, one lift will be owned by an old family, and the rest of the resort will be a corporate entity. And so that's, interestingly enough, about this article, as I was researching it, both these companies are trying desperately to crack the European market, but it's just too convoluted, or at least it has proved thus far. The ownership structure is it's tough to get any deals done over there with these American holding companies.
Oddly enough, too, the Epic Pass was accepted in St. Anton. Speaking of
was?
That, yeah. If you stay there for 3 days, you can use your Epic Pass if you stay in one of the local hotels. Okay, I'm going to also on a little quiz here. See if you can guess this. I did a blog post not too long ago on the rising cost of lift tickets, and I researched what lift tickets cost in 1975. Okay, what do you think a lift ticket to go to Aspen cost in 1975?
Are we adjusting for inflation or not?
We are not, but I did both. So you guess what it cost, and then I'll tell you what the adjustment for inflation was.
I'm going to say 1975. Not adjusted, $40.
Not adjusted, $11, and that was the most expensive.
Geez.
That was the most expensive. Adjusted for inflation, that's $51.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Breckenridge was $7.50.
Wow.
And I tell people though,
amazing.
You were riding up on much slower lifts. You didn't get to ski as much. There were a lot less lifts, a lot less terrain, so people were crowded in there more. And it's a much different. It was a much different product too.
Yeah, and times have changed, and there's there's an arm race now in terms of amenities, food and beverage. All these places are. It reminded me a little bit of theme park scene, going to some of those Vail resorts, and even some of the others, just how they're trying to activate the mountain or activate different parts of the mountain.
It's funny that you say that. I was at Keystone also this past weekend, and I felt like I was the base area. I felt like I was going through Six Flags. It looked like a Wild West town, and I felt it was like Six Flags.
Yeah, it's a little different, and I mean that's part of the evolution. And some resorts will choose to do something very different, and that'll be their competitive advantage, I imagine, with a certain group of people.
Yeah, I noticed something else too. I went to Breckenridge, and they had a brand new, relatively new on-mountain restaurant. And then my wife and I went to Park City not too long after that, and they also had, it was the exact same building. They used the exact same architectural drawings for the exact same building. I mean, everything from down to the plumbing in the bathroom was the same.
Yep, synergy.
Yes, synergy.
I interviewed Vail CEO Rob Katz, who they get a lot of criticism about all their mountains feeling similar. And I put the question to him pretty pointedly. And he said, look, we could only make these places so similar if we tried, and there's only so many ways to save costs. At the end of the day, you need to have growing machines on every mountain. You need to have staff on every mountain. Everyone can wear the same uniforms, but there's not that many places to sort of group the buying. But there are things like that you do see at these places. And, all the Vail instructors wear the same parka all over the world. So
yeah,
that's a dynamic.
Kyle, I enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to link your article on our blog post at travelwithhawkeye.net. Click on blog for people to read your article. I also have on there the post from the general manager of Big Sky about the IKON Pass, and we'll also put my blog post up there about lift tickets. Thank you, Kyle, very much. All right, as we move forward here on the Travel with Hawkeye podcast, just a few moments before we close out the program, I'd like to talk about TSA PreCheck. I'm not being paid to talk about this. Isn't a paid spot. This is just one traveler recommending highly. If you travel more than 2 trips a year, you got to get the TSA PreCheck. It doesn't take that long online to fill it out. It is $85. It lasts for a number of years. You got to go by the airport or one of their offices. It doesn't take that long. The time you will save, and I bring this up because the time that you will save is incredible. I was traveling with some people who weren't on TSA PreCheck. I got through the security line at the airport, through the TSA checkpoint, in minutes. You don't have to take your shoes off. You can leave your laptop in there. You do have to take the stuff out of your pocket, like your keys and your cell phone and your belt off. You still do have to do that. I didn't realize it the first time. But then I ended up just waiting for them for, it seemed like almost 10 minutes for them to get through the line. So why would you not do that? But the question I have, though, is I noticed this in Denver, and Denver really only has 2 security areas to go through. Like at DFW Airport, they have 5 different terminals, and every terminal has a number of TSA checkpoints. Denver, for their massive airport, has 2, so they're huge lines. And I noticed the TSA line there seemed to be more people used it than anywhere else. Like at Dallas, you just walk right up and go right almost to the conveyor belt. Not at Denver. And I'm thinking eventually the TSA line's going to get crowded with people who are figuring out this is worth it to save a lot of time. And I wonder what's going to happen at that point. In the meantime, though, I think it's a pretty good deal. It's like I said, $85. You do have to, they'll send you a number, your known traveler number, and you do have to put that on your airline's frequent flyer account. So you do have to get a frequent flyer account, but if you are a frequent flyer anyway, it really is worth it. All right, that kind of concludes our episode today of Travel with Hawkeye. I want to point to next week because I'm very excited. Next week, Norm Hitzges, who in Dallas is a sportscasting legend. He's been on ESPN. He's been on a couple different radio stations here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for over 30 years, and he is also an avid traveler. Just got back from a 2-week trip to Africa. We're going to talk to Norm Hitzges next week on the Travel with Hawkeye podcast. Don't miss it. I'm Mark Hawkeye Lewis. Remember, the world is out there.